Elections in India are a carnival of democracy. That's a line you must have heard 1,000 times. Well, some people at least want fewer of those carnivals. What they want is simultaneous elections. The idea is simple. Hold the polling for the state assembly and the Lok Sabha elections at the same time. So that's pretty much all that's simple about this. The concept of simultaneous elections is bitterly contested even as the ruling Bharatiya Janata Party pushes the idea hard. That's the number one argument that supporters of simultaneous elections pull out. In 2014, the Lok Sabha elections ended up costing India 3,500 crore rupees. By scrunching state and central elections together, supporters argue that it will help save India money. But do state elections really end up costing that much? In 2017, the Gujarat State Assembly elections costed rupees 240 crore. That's less than 50 crore a year. That's really not a lot. And remember, this is elections we're talking about. Literally the most important thing that keeps India ticking as a democracy. Does India really want to be miserly about that? In 2015, a parliamentary standing committee argued that the model code of conduct hampers the work of a government. The model code is put in place just before an election and bars governments from announcing new schemes since it might unfairly influence voters. But is that really such a big deal? The model code remains in place for only around 4 to 6 weeks before an election, and it only applies to new government schemes. Other government work can continue on as before. Do we really want to tamper with India's system of democracy for such a small amount of gain? Supporters of simultaneous elections argue that frequent polls distract government from long-term development work and force them into populist schemes. This is an argument made by none other than Prime Minister Modi himself. The other side of the coin, of course, is that elections force governments to perform and hold them to account. Remember, South Indian politics was often decried as populist because of schemes such as rice for 2 rupees a kilo, as well as midday meal schemes directly aimed at winning elections. But it is precisely this populist politics that has allowed the South to develop. Now, politicians might not like elections because of the pressure it puts on them, but it is actually the very engine that drives a democracy. Since simultaneous elections do not explicitly change the center-state relationship, its supporters argue that fears that it would end up harming India's federal structure are overblown. Critics, though, smell a rat. One study, for example, found that when polls were held simultaneously, as many as 77% of voters tended to choose the same party at the center as well as the state. In fact, for the first 2 decades after India's independence, when polls were held simultaneously, one party, the Congress, tended to dominate both tiers of government. Proposals to make simultaneous elections work have involved fixed-term assemblies, drastically changing how a no-confidence motion works, only allowing it if it results in the election of a new government, and placing state assemblies under central rule should they be dissolved before an election date. None of this is going to be easy. In fact, it involves a near overhaul of the way Indian democracy currently works. Placing state assemblies under long periods of central rule would be patently undemocratic. And a government falling when it fails a no-confidence motion is one of the central tenets of the British parliamentary system that India follows. Getting any of this to work would involve a host of complicated constitutional changes.